So, the key thing I learned about identifying and reframing challenges was that in order to best break the frame, myself and my group mates had to recognize that Indonesia was a community with diverse geographical landscapes and cultural contexts, and that infrastructure without considering local wisdom and those contexts is not a measure of success to them. So, we kind of had to shed our Western centric ways of measuring success by output and to truly consider new variables in the light of empowering local stakeholders rather than victimizing them. And so breaking the frame for me was a matter of looking at the process and how infrastructure was brought about rather than why it hadn't already been brought about. And this was a key thing I learned about identifying and reframing challenges. So, working on the group presentation, what I really enjoyed was getting close to my teammates and understanding the different perspectives that they brought to the table, showing up for each other every single day, meeting each other on the bus, in the lecture halls, at the field visits, was really enjoyable, and I just had such a good time with them. Something what that I found difficult about working on this group assignment was that we were all quite passionate and stubborn about the insights we could bring to the table. And so discussions could become quite heated sometimes, and we were actually the only group to raise our hands when it came to reflecting on whether we often challenged each other's ideas. As touched in the Harvard Business Review, it felt as though differences really were highlighted and that we never shied away from that. Although it was difficult, it actually produced some of our best new variables for breaking the frame. And something I learned about teamwork, or what I learned about teamwork, was that there's a level of trust that needs to be lent to each other. And so respect has to come in the way that you show up for your teammates, but also respecting their capabilities and trusting them to show up for you as well. And a part of that for me was learning how to embrace uncertainty to do with this assignment and to trust in my teammates. And in reflecting on the 2 week program overall, the most meaningful or satisfying thing for me was being able to make connections within my assignment group and also my wider friendship group. Because I went into the trip thinking I really wasn't going to be able to make any friends. And yeah, even learning Bahasa Indonesian, being able to immerse myself in the city and culture each night was the most meaningful to me. My biggest challenges were adapting to the weather and being able to put myself out there socially as I was quite anxious. And the biggest challenge by far was in accepting that some questions would not yield the expected answers. So, when asking Runga, my local buddy, about whether he thought infrastructure in Indonesia was safe, he said yes, and that everyone in his community believed so, despite regular power outages or not being able to stand near metal flooring during heavy rain as there was a risk of electrocution. And so my proudest achievement was being able to perform well on the assignment with my group and winning the Best Group Award with them. I think our ability to overcome our cultural biases and to recognize our flaws in the way we were thinking was incredibly important to being able to reframe the challenge with a more inclusive perspective. So, once I could recognize my own demographic context, that is, I come from a very Western background, being raised in Australia, and I come from a very privileged educational background as well. I was able to check myself, and my group mates were also able to check each other regularly, which is a strategy outlined by Van de Kamp when we made statements that seemed to generalize or stereotype, which is kind of a dangerous way that unconscious biases can shape the way we think. And an example of this was when we failed to recognize that rural or non urbanized areas were not just farmland, but also mountainous regions, riversides, and even communities that live on fishing boats on the ocean. And that self awareness I developed and that I'd gotten to share with my group mates over the course of the program was my proudest achievement and definitely something I felt like has changed my perspective permanently on how I approach and how I identify, how I reflect problems and challenges in different kinds of communities.